Alright, hello. This video and probably one video after this one, we're going to be covering stuff, getting ready for the alternate MCA assessment. If you are taking the actual MCA, this would help for that too, but mostly this is made for the non-juniors who are not taking the MCA but taking an alternate assessment. So it should cover everything you need. Along the way, I'd encourage you to pause the video and try the questions before watching the solutions. I think that'll be the best way to review. So here's your first one. This is a good one. You can either do mean median mode kind of just by hand, or you can use your calculator. I guess you got to use your calculator either way probably, but I'm going to show you how to do it on the calculator, but certainly you can do them, like the standard way too. Okay, so I guess mode you can't really do on the calculator. Mode is just the most frequent. So here 23 occurs 3 times, and that's more than any of the others. So the mode is 23. And then mean and median, I'm just going to get off my calculator. So to do this, you just go in here, and hit stat, and then edit, and then you got to enter them in. So if you already have data, I always put them in list 1. And if you already have data in list 1 here, I'd go up and hit clear and enter, and that'll clear it out. And then just start entering the numbers one at a time. So 22, enter, 23, enter, etc., etc. Alright, so there's all the numbers in there. Once you got them in, just hit stat again, and we're going to go over to calc, and we're going to do one variable statistics, and hit enter, and then make sure list 1 is selected. That's where we put them. If you needed to change, the lists are down here above these keys. But I'm just going to hit enter a few times. And if you have an older calculator, it might look a little different here, but basically just hit enter, and then it should spit out these numbers. So there's our mean is 26.1, this X bar. So mean is 26.1, and median, if you scroll down a little bit, the median is 25. Okay, so we just got these mean, median off our calculators. Percentile rank is the percent you're ahead of or equal to. So to do a percentile rank, you just take how many spots there are, which I think there's 10. If we label these quick. Okay, so there's 10 total spots, and then how many are we ahead of? If we're Billy, we're ahead of or equal, actually it should say ahead of or equal to. We're ahead of or equal to 8 out of the 10 spots. So Billy's percentile would be like the 80th percentile. He's ahead of or equal to 80% of people. Okay. Next up is determining an outlier. So an outlier is just a number that's far away from the others. So like my gut on here tells me the answer is no. Right, this one, 36, is not that far from the others. But if you want to know for sure, there's a little formula. And basically, I'll throw the formula up here, and then we'll do it for this question. So maybe I'm going to go to a different slide just to give myself more space. Okay, but basically the formula is the max allowed before it's considered an outlier is you take Q3, sorry, let's just say Q3, and you add 1.5 times the IQR, and we'll talk about what IQR is in a second. That's the max. And then the min is similar, except you take Q1 and minus 1.5 IQR. So it's kind of taking the quartile numbers, the quarter numbers, and then moving up a little bit and down a little bit. And if anything falls outside of that, it's no good. Okay, and IQR you get by just minusing Q3 from Q1. So that's where I'm going to start, is just get the Q3 and Q1 number. All right, so I'm going to go back into my calculator here and scroll down. So Q1 is 23 and Q3 is 28. So 23 and 28 are the numbers I need for Q3, Q1. So Q3 is 28. Q1 is 23. So just minus those, and then you get 5. All right, and then just kind of go from there. So next up, I have to do 1.5 times IQR in both of these. So I'm going to do 1.5 times 5, which I think is 7.5. And so the max allowed is Q3, which was a 28, plus this 7.5, 1.5 IQR, and that gives you 35.5. And then on the low end, you would do Q1, which was 23, minus that 7.5, 1.5 IQR, and that should be, I don't know, what is is that 16? I think it's 15.5 if I'm doing it right. So that's sort of the range. Anything between 15.5 to 35.5, that's considered normal. All right. And so if you go back, actually, that 36 is actually an outlier then, because it's beyond that. 35.5 was the highest we could go. So this is an outlier. So the answer to this is actually yes. I thought it wouldn't be, but it's just far enough outside of what's normal that that is considered an outlier. Okay, next up is to actually do some scatter plots. And these numbers are actually the numbers that you get from your calculator. Like the min and the max are the two n numbers here. And then on a scatter plot, the middle one is called Q2, which is also the median. So it splits it in half. And then Q1 actually splits the lower half of numbers in half again. And Q3 up here, called the third quartile, this takes the upper half of numbers and splits that in half. So when you do this, you get 25% of the data falling in each one. And obviously these numbers are different than the ones on my calculator here, but these are like pre-made scatter plots and we just got to interpret them. Okay, so basically so like for bookstore B here, 25% of the book prices were here between like 60 and I don't know, about 72. And then 25% were here, 25% here, and 25% here. All right, so pause the video and think of which one would you shop at here. Okay, and the answer to this question is there really isn't a right answer, right? Like if you look, I would probably lean towards bookstore B because its median, which is one measure of average, is a little bit lower than bookstore A. So I'd probably go to bookstore B. Store B because median is lower. But there's no way to know like for sure. Like there's probably some books that might be a little bit cheaper at bookstore A. I guess the other observation I would make here is bookstore B has a wider range of prices. Okay, so they've got some up here on the high end, really expensive ones, but they also got some ones on the really low end. So I'd probably be a bookstore B customer, but then I would like just be careful that I'm not hitting one of these high end ones. So I'd maybe check online with bookstore A just to make sure I'm not getting price gouged. But generally, you know, I guess what we can conclude here is bookstore B's median is a little bit lower, and then also bookstore B's prices are definitely more spread out than bookstore A. That's what we can conclude from that scatter plot. Okay, next up are a couple sine, cos, tan questions. So again, I'd pause the video and give this a shot. Okay, so the first thing here is we got to figure out, is it sine, cos, or tan, right? And so on this particular one, here's our angle. So this side is the opposite leg. And then this side is technically adjacent, but because it's the long side, it's actually hypotenuse. So the adjacent would be the adjacent leg over here, right? But the two we really have are op hypotenuse, so this is going to be a sine question because we don't really have anything over here on the adjacent. Okay, so the setup here is you just do the sine of the angle, which is 42 degrees, equals the op of 7 over the hypotenuse of x, and then we just got to solve this. Okay, so kind of the first step is to do sine 42 on our calculator. And make sure your mode is in degree mode here because it's a degree angle. All right, and then I'm just going to type sine 42 quick and get a decimal. So it's about 0.67 by the look of it. So I'm going to write this as 0.67 over 1. Make sure I copied that right. Okay, yeah, 0.67 over 1 here. Sorry. And now just solve this with cross products. So take 1 times 7 has to equal x times 0.67. And 1 times 7 is just 7. And now to solve for x, you just got to divide by 0.67. So our answer is going to be 7 divided by this. So if I go back to my calculator, I can just take 7 and divide. And I'm going to use the second answer. Sorry, second in this previous answer. So you could use 0.67, but I'm just doing the more precise by doing 7 divided by that. And we get about 10.5, roughly speaking. Okay, which hopefully makes sense. If we look at this picture, yeah, this hypotenuse could be about 10.5. It definitely should be longer than the 7 side. Okay, next sine costan 1. Our goal here is to find the measure of angle B. Okay, so to find an angle, you're going to use the inverse sine, cos, or tan. And we have all the sides. You could use any of these, right? Because we have all three sides. So I guess I'm going to maybe use adjacent and hypotenuse. So I'm going to use cos. Right, and again, from angle B's perspective, this one is adjacent, this one's hypotenuse. Okay, so basically I'm just going to do cos minus 1 of, what is it, adjacent 7 over hypotenuse 25. Okay, and do that on my calculator. And please know if like you did sine, right, sine would be op and hypotenuse, so sine would be 24 over 25. But these should give you the same thing. It doesn't really matter which one you use here. Just make sure you do the inverse and make sure you're in degree mode. So let's take a look just to see that I'm not lying here. So I'm going to do second, cos minus 1. I think it was 7 over 25. I think that's what it was. So it's, yeah, so it's telling us it's about 73.7. And just to make sure that this works out, let's try sine minus 1 of 24 over 25. I think that's what it was. And we get the same thing. So 73.7 degrees is right. Oops. 73.7 degrees. Okay, another right triangle one here. And I think you could probably actually use sine cos tan here. It'd just be kind of messy. You'd have to do a couple steps. So see if you can figure out something else to use here. Okay, so the key to this is you can do Pythagorean theorem, which is basically leg squared plus the leg squared has to equal the hypotenuse squared. Okay, and this is kind of messy, honestly, because I don't want to do this because I'm stinking lazy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cover this up and go brrr, and I'm just going to find this, I'm going to maybe call it y. So if I even forget about that expression for a second, whatever is on that side called y squared plus 5 squared has to equal 15 squared. So I'm just going to try this little bit of math here first. This is 225, and then minus the 25 from both sides, 200, and then square root of this, and I don't have any idea what that is. Okay, so according to my calculator, it's 14.1. So all this means is this side over here, right? This side, I'm going to erase it now. This side has to be 14.1. Okay, and so basically now we can find x, because x plus 3 needs to equal that 14.1, and then just minus the 3 from both sides, and you get 11.1. Right, so you could solve all this too, and you should get 11.1, but it's going to be a lot easier just to like figure out the number and then subtract 3 from it. Hopefully that makes sense.